in Ephesians, we're continuing our study on the whole armor of God. And we're in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 16. In this section, it talks about a shield. And this is my sign for shield. It's used for defense. The shield of faith. Today, in our modern society, we have shields. And so we'll take a look here. Police officers, SWAT team members, they use shields like this to prevent themselves from being shot if there's a shootout with a criminal. SWATs use this kind of protection. They try to prevent themselves from being injured. And there's also other kinds of shields when there's rioting, when people are protesting. So oftentimes people protest. And maybe people carry signs and they're against something, and so people go out and they march against something, whatever that cause may be. And maybe they even commit acts of violence and destroy private property or catch things on fire. And so police officers come and they create a barrier. They use shields so that if people throw things at the police, like rocks or glass, or even if something is, even a small bomb or something, that the police officers use that as protection. They use shields, these sort of riot shields that offer their protection. So, in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 16, it says, above all. So it was talking, Paul is writing, and he's saying, well, you need to add this to this, and then add this to this. But now he says, above all. So here he's been talking about the armor of God. First he said, take up the whole armor of God. That's how Paul started it off. And he explained about having gird your loins with truth. And then he goes on to talk about having put on the breastplate of righteousness. And then having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. So this is what preceded Ephesians chapter 6, verse 16. But then he says, above all. So it's saying, those four things I talked about prior, now above all. So he's saying, this whole armor of God, girding your loins with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Now, above all, these practices that we have been discussing this on our Sunday mornings for a while. We've been talking about how do we use these different armors that God has given us. And now it says, above all, taking the shield of faith. So we're going to go on to this idea of the shield of faith. The shield of faith. We're going to focus in on that section of the verse. The word shield that's used here is only used one time in the New Testament. It's not used anywhere else. In the Greek culture, this word shield, it actually means door. And this is the one time the word is used. So I tried to research it a little bit more, this idea of a shield of faith. The Roman shield, it was called a scutum. all the way back, the Roman soldiers, they used a kind of shield, and there were different designs, there were different shapes of the shields. Typically, they were about 4 feet tall. And they were extremely heavy. They were not light like we want shields to be today. They weren't this little tiny shield, this little round thing that could be moved around easily. It was not really for fighting, it was more for defense. You couldn't use it to fight because you would just kind of use it to stay in the same place. Remember how Paul talked about standing firm, don't be moved? So Roman soldiers, and this applies to Christians as well, we are fighting our enemy, the devil. And Paul reminds Christians to stand firm. Don't just run and fight them. He says stand firm. Don't chase the devil around, as it were. Don't pursue your enemy. Just stand firm. Get into this defensive position to stay in one place. Your feet have these shoes on, and you are like a stone. You are implanted in that place. You are grounded. And the Roman soldiers, they would set up a barrier with their shields. And basically, they were almost like a door. That's how big and bulky and heavy they were. They were typically made out of wood and leather. They were typically soaked in a substance like water, so that when fiery arrows came, they would quench those fiery arrows. And Paul explains about that and how it's to be used for defensive, the shield is to be used for defensive purposes. So Roman soldiers, back at this time, they were very organized, and they were a very powerful, they were the most elite army of their day. So first, in focusing on the armor of God, the shield of faith, there's some questions that one should ask. The shield of faith protects the whole person. And so, faith protects. If you get down low enough, the darts or whatever is coming at you can't achieve its goal, those weapons. It's for safety. It offers protection for the head. It also offers protection for the heart. And this connects to the idea of enabling us to remember our eternal reward. We're remembering the eternal reward that God has given us. Faith also protects our arms, enabling us to gain strength to do God's will. Additionally, faith protects our feet, enabling us to stand firm so that we will not be misled. So studying this, even for myself, it's been a fascinating study to consider. And then you think, why did Paul write this? Paul was imprisoned. And the soldiers were there to protect Paul. The mobs from trying to kill Paul. People hated him. They wanted him dead. There were many people who wanted him dead because he preached the gospel and he stood firm in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so a Roman soldier would use a shield to protect Paul. And so that's where he got this idea to explain about the importance of the shield of faith. The Pharisees and the religious rulers of that day wanted Paul dead. They wanted to kill him. God had given him great power to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ to the known world at the time. And so people were angry at Paul. They wanted him dead. Paul used to be a Pharisee. He used to be one of the religious leaders himself. He had been involved in the same kind of persecutions that he was now being persecuted against. He had persecuted Christ. He had taken people and imprisoned them. And he had even murdered Christians. And he had applauded the murder of Stephen, the first martyr. And we see how God touched Saul at the time, his life, and then God changed his name to Paul. And Jesus appeared to him on the road to Damascus and says, "Why are you persecuting me? Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And that just changed his world. He thought that he was doing right. He thought he was being religious for God, but God revealed to him the wickedness of his ways. And then God sent him a man to heal him from his blindness. And then God called him, and he became the greatest evangelist in history. And he wrote 13 books in the New Testament. He went through all of these terrible, terrible persecutions. All these terrible things happened to him. And now he's talking about the importance of the shield of faith. And how he's talking about how faith is the greatest piece of armor you need to have. Before, Paul had been he'd been doing good works. He'd been trying to earn his way to God. He'd trying to earn promotion, as it were, in God's kingdom. But he realized none of that was worth anything. It was all about having faith in Jesus Christ. Good works couldn't save him. And so he learned to live by faith, and by faith alone, not by doing good works. Those things couldn't save him, couldn't redeem his soul. And in Ephesians chapter 8, he says that it's by grace you are saved, through faith. It is not by yourselves. It's not by your works of righteousness. It is the gift of God. It's not by works. There's nothing you could do to earn it. If we could earn it, we would boast. And Paul was a very humble man. He had great faith. So historically, we see that Paul was converted, and then he began to spread the gospel over the entire Roman and Greek, the world at the time. And churches became established throughout the known world. And it wasn't just Paul, but there were many other followers of Jesus. For example, Martin Luther, he started the Reformation back in the 1500s. He was, a monk of the Catholic Church, and he began to read the letters of Paul, and he read, "We must live by faith." And his mind was just blown apart, and he fell on his knees before God, and he cried out to God, "God, I want to be saved by faith. I can't do religious works," because he started to see how the Catholic Church focused on religion and earning your salvation through works, and then you're saved through works. That was what was being taught at the time. So Martin Luther woke up to this, and he began to preach for the first time. And he started the Reformation in Germany, and pretty soon it spread throughout the whole entire world. And pretty soon, countries started to leave the Roman Catholic faith. They wanted to kill Martin Luther. They wanted to burn him at the stake. That was their desire. That was the Pope's desire. But he fled in Germany, and he began to continue to preach the gospel. And it broke, and you see just the church's power. The Dark Ages ended when Martin Luther came, and when he began to preach and share this. And then pretty soon the Anabaptists started, in different denominations of Christians, and here we are today, an independent church. But it all started back with Martin Luther in the early 1500s, and it's amazing. And there were other people like this too.
You see that we have to
Martin Luther, he loved Paul, and he fell in love with the books and with the teachings of Paul. And so once again, there's this emphasis on this idea of the shield of faith. And we see in the book of 2 Samuel chapter 22, verse 31, it says, "As for God, his way is perfect. He is a shield for all who take refuge in him." So this verse, God was speaking to the Israelite people when Israel, they had so many enemies at that time. But God had established that his people would be shielded by him. God himself was a shield to his people. So when their enemies came against them and tried to attack them and tried to wipe them off the face of the earth, God's people would not fail because God was their protector. He was their refuge. And this was God's promise to the Jewish people. I'm going to give you protection. I'm going to shield you from these nations around you who want to wipe you off the face of the earth. And they have failed time and time again throughout history because God is with them. God is their shield. He is their protector. In Psalm chapter 7, verse 10, it says, "My shield is God Most High. Who saves the upright in heart." My shield is God Most High, who saves the upright in heart. God is a shield. We follow him with our whole heart. And David had a passionate heart to follow God. God was looking, and he chose David to become the king of the Israelites. The prophet Samuel, he was the judge at the time. And God told him to pick out another king. Saul had previously been the king, but he rebelled against God. And so God rejected Saul, and God said he was going to choose another king. And so he told Samuel to go to the family of Jesse. This family. And he went there, and he looked at all their sons. And Samuel looked at their sons and thought, "Ooh, that one looks good." And God said, "Nope. You look at the outside, you look at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart." So Samuel kept looking, and he asked Jesse, "Do you have any more kids?" He's like, "Yeah, I have one kid. He's, out there taking care of the sheep and away in the fields. He's a little boy." And Samuel says, "Bring him. I want to see him." And God said, "That's the one that I want." Because God could see he was a man after God's own heart. He loved God passionately. It was about his heart. And so this verse talks about how God saves the upright in heart. That's why God chose David, because he was a man he had an upright heart. God is not interested in our outward appearance, our intelligence, our good looks. He is not interested in that. What God cares about is our hearts, what our hearts are like before him, what our souls are like. Are we connected to God? Do we love God? Do we cherish God above all? And if we do that, God is our shield, and that's his promise to us today.
Now I have this picture here that you see of 3 shields all lined up. And see how they stand firm on the ground. They're probably about 4 feet tall, maybe 2 feet wide as they stand. And, if you were in battle and somebody was running toward you, then you would stand firm and holding your shield in front of you. So this is the picture that I kind of want to have you to have in mind, in that it would cover you. It would be almost box-like. And then if you had a lot of soldiers in there, they could create like a box. And then in the center would be the captain, would be the one who was in charge of all of the other ones. And he would be protected from all of the arrows that would be coming towards him. You've seen little turtles, right? You know how slow they go, but they're very well covered, they're very protected. And when they are in danger, then they withdraw into their shell, and their shells are so hard that there's like nothing that you could do with that. And Roman soldiers, when they went to war, they had their shields ready, and then they could surround their captain. And it was hard to get through them, it was hard to destroy them when they were in this particular formation. People would struggle to do these things. They would, could pound at them. But this box-like shield would protect them. And remember again, too, it was kind of like a door, so if you set them all up all around, you had like an impenetrable box that people could not get through. And you know how tanks in the army, those great big giant tanks that have the guns on top of them. You could shoot at them as much as you want, but they are as hard as rock, and they are well protected and well covered and closed in. So that was a similar way that the Roman army was using these shields, how they would box in their important leaders, because they would be so totally covered by these shields that they held on their arms. It was a great defense. So an important foundation that we have from here is to remember about faith and to think on faith. And faith is sign for faith that I have here. And we see here in Hebrews in 11, chapter 6, it says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. It's impossible. So we see the significance and the importance of faith. Often people will come to me and they'll say, I don't get it. What's the meaning of faith? And there is no easy explanation. Because it's something that you believe in without seeing. Faith is a trust. It's just a core belief. How God made the earth, how everything was out in the universe. We trust in that. For it says that he that cometh to God must believe that he is. Must believe. Must believe down to their deepest heart that they must believe that God truly exists, that he truly is, and that he is a rewarder, that he gives to you, that he gives to those who diligently seek him. And it says in the New Testament, and Paul repeats this often telling about the significance and the importance of faith. Without it, we have nothing. So remember, think of that soldier. If he did not have that shield of faith, if he had nothing, he would have absolutely no defense against the enemy. And when they fired their arrows against him, they would hit their mark every time. But the shield of faith, the picture is that the importance is that it's a great protection. And in our lives, we need to have this solid, concrete belief and trust in faith. And a lot of people think they don't need faith, that they can do it on their own, that they themselves can get salvation. But Paul has explained over and over again that one can move mountains with faith if one believes. From Matthew, Jesus said that to all the people. People with no faith do not please God, and they can't. So Paul is exhorting the people to keep a strong faith through all of the problems at that time, and they had many, many enemies. He is saying to have a solid and complete faith, and God would reward them for that. People with no faith will not receive the same reward, will not receive the same gift that God would give true believers. And then within the chapter 2, we see this, that it says, above all, taking the shield of faith, with which you will be able, see this word here, quench. This word, it's an interesting word, when I was reading this. It's like extinguish. We're like over there, like the fire extinguisher. That red one that we have over there on the wall. If there were a fire, then we would use that extinguisher to quench the fire. And it would put it out. So to quench it means to totally put it out so that it is totally dissolved, that it is totally gone. So when we look at this, it says you will be able to quench all, and look at this word, all all of the fiery darts. And the fiery darts, that word at that time refers to, look at this picture right here of the arrow of the crossbow with the arrow in it, and they would ignite a flame at the end of it, so that the enemy would do, because they would put tar on the arrow, and then they would light it, and then they would send it toward the soldiers. And that's how that they would fight against their enemy, and they would send these arrows, multitude of arrows. And what it says is, these are the fiery darts of the wicked one, of the devil, who is always aiming for us. And so Christians need to have this fiery faith, because if they don't, then the devil is excited and happy, because he can get them right in the heart. He can harm them and hurt them. And I have another picture here that shows what I'm trying to describe here to you. See the size of this shield. See the arrows that are embedded in it. So this word here, the shield of faith. Now remember, thinking of the enemy sending these flaming arrows. And remember, the devil, think of him as one of these such enemies. And what he sends to us despair. He sends arrows of doubt into our hearts, and lies. So many, all of these things. And this is the devil's work. So we have to have a defense. We have to have a protection, and that is the shield of faith that we have against our enemy, the devil, who wants to control us, who wants to conquer us. So we need this defense. We need this protection against us. So it's interesting that word that they use, quench, which kind of means to put out a fire or whatever. So when you remember, when you think that the soldiers would wet down their shields, so that when the arrows came against them, the fire would be quenched. It didn't matter how many came against them. Over and over again, those fires would be put out from the flames on the arrows. And that's what we are trying to achieve by the shield of faith with the devil. So remember that water quenches our thirst. We know this. So think of it, if they soaked their shield with it. Water is often used to represent the Word of God as well. So that is why the fiery shield becomes as the Word of God. So it says, with our faith we are able to quench all of these fiery darts, everything the devil wants to put against us. Because I want to say that there are three very important things that the devil is extremely skilled at. And let us look at these here. The lust of the flesh. You know, the things, the experiences that our body wants us to do. And there are so many of all of these. There's the lust of the flesh within our hearts. We all have this lust. We all do. We have all experienced this. You know, if we go out into the world wants us to be involved in this, and we are to remove ourselves from these things. Because if we get involved with these activities, then you want them all the time. And this brings us into sin. And there's a list of all of these, of the desires of the body, what the body wants to do. And that is what the devil is skilled at, and he will constantly throw these darts at us, these arrows at us. And he continues to do it. So we have to have a protection against this. We have to have a shield against this. And you can never let your guard down. You know, some people, it's like they take it off and they put it in a corner and they say, oh, I'm good, I can do it by myself. It's impossible, I'm sorry. You know, I just want to tell you that it is impossible to stand firm. We need to keep this shield in front of us so that every arrow that comes will fall short. because otherwise we will die. When we die, or raptured, either one of these choices, we won't need that shield anymore because we will be in the glory of God and we will have His grace within us. That's when the battle ends. But we are constantly fighting against this devil. We are constantly fighting this war, and we must continue to fight, and we must stand strong. Because if we depend on God, He will give us the authority and He will give us the ways that we can defend ourselves against this. You know, there are so many Christians in this world that seem to put their shields aside. But we can't do it. I mean, we have to keep doing it even when we're old and we can barely see. We still have to hang on to our faith until the very end when our hearts stop and we die and we are done. And we are taken into heaven with a new body and into a new life in Christ. So the shield, and if you looked at it and could see all the marks in it from one's lifetime, from all of the years, from all of these lusts of the flesh that the devil has been sending to us and pointing to us, because what our body wants to do, this internal war that we have, it never stops. And then let us look at the second point here. We also have what the eyes take in, what the eyes see. And it is so terrible these days. You know, with the Super Bowl that we're going to be having today, and they're going to be having all of these ads that are going to be coming towards us, and all of these advertisements during halftime. Remember, 15-second ads that are going to be coming during the intermission when the lights go low and the music starts playing, and all of these lights are flashing, and the eyes are taking all of this stuff in. And we are fascinated. We are fascinated with everything that is going on. Table. Because remember, you know, the hearing people can hear it all, and they are taken in by sound. The deaf people are taken in by their eyes. So, you know, really, I feel bad for the hearing people because they actually get it through two senses as well, the eyes and the ears. But still, we need to protect what we see because the world offers things that they say are so beautiful, are so wonderful in all of this world. But the devil is still slinging his arrows. He is still sending his arrows. And then this one, the third one, is the pride of life. You know, the things that we want to do to glorify ourselves. We want power. What we want for our lives. All three of these things. The first, found in 1 John chapter 2, verses 16. When you look at this, you see that all of this correlate to what he is saying about protecting ourselves against the world, not loving the world. Because if you are involved in the world, you cannot be with the Father. It says if we are friends with the world, then we are called enemies of God. Think of that. So this shield, this defensive shield against the devil is very important. Because the devil doesn't stop. He is strong. And he will come after us. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. These are the arrows that he slings at us that we must defend ourselves against. But we have the good news. We can quench this because our hope is in God and he will bring us to victory. For Christ has already conquered the devil. Remember when he was in the desert for 40 days and he had had nothing to eat, and the devil came towards him. He was excited. He said, take this rock, change it into bread. And Jesus said, no. Oh, I don't accept. I'm not going to obey you. I obey one Lord. It would have been great because he hadn't eaten for 40 days if he had changed that rock. And I'm sure that Jesus was really, really hungry. But this was a temptation from the devil, and he went against it. And then the devil took him up to a mountain, and he said, look, see all of these riches in all of the world. I'll give them to you. And Jesus said, no. And then the devil took him to the highest top of the temple. And he said, if you throw yourself off of this temple, the angels will come and they will save you, for they will not cause you to even harm your foot. And Jesus said, no. The devil was trying to work against him. So you see the arrows that he was slinging against him. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, a pride of life. The devil uses everything that he has. And it goes all the way back to Eve. When Eve saw the fruit, and she desired the fruit, and the devil said, oh no, if you take of this fruit, then you will be equal to God. And Eve lusted, she wanted this. And she ate of the fruit, and then she gave it to Adam. So you see how the devil went around, he got to Eve, and then he got to Adam, and then they fell into sin. And then the world turned upside down at that time, because it became sinful. They fell short of the glory of God, and that is how the devil uses. He uses God's children. He uses children, he uses families. He uses your very, very good friends to betray you, to come against you. That is the work of the devil. He's very, very clever. He's cunning in how he plans his betrayals and how he circles you and works for you and how he tricks you. You know, sometimes you see these animals when you're watching the Animal Planet, and you see how they are stalking their prey, and you see this unsuspecting animal coming. You see one paw go out, and then another as they're sneaking down. They don't even make a sound. They're so quiet as they sneak up on, and then they run and they catch them. Their prey. And they usually seek out the weak. They seek out the weakest ones. They can't keep up with the herd, and then they take them down. So this is a warning from us, to us. In 2 Peter it says that he's saying that the devil is like a lion, circling and seeking us. And we are looking to the day when Christ will come. We should not be sleeping, we should not be, laying down in bed, as it were, not being ready to be taken up, because then you are also ready for the devil to come after you. And there are so many Christians that act as if they're asleep, but they don't care. They say they're tired. It's like, be awake. Keep your faith strong. Trust in God. And this will bring you to victory, and this will bring you to conquer the enemy. Because Jesus said again and again, and it says in Hebrews, without faith, we cannot please God. There is no pleasing God. So we must keep the faith. And we must continue with our defense against the enemy. No matter how scarred our shield becomes, even 1,000 times we are brought against it, we need to know that we will stand so that we will be able to go home. Through all of the years, we suffer wars in our lives. Many Christians suffer because they let their guard down just for a moment, and then they're caught, and their faith goes off to the wind. And many Christians fall again into sin. So it's very important that we remember to repent, that we remember to turn to God, to tell Him that we are sorry for our sins, that our faith has fallen, and that we have made a mistake. And God will forgive us that quickly. He will lift us up and take us again, helping us to stand firm again. He will right us. He will bring our shield in front of us again, that we may be protected. Just like a captain, he will be supporting and looking out for us, watching our back. Because God is always behind us, just like the song said. He's always near us. And without Him, everything is impossible. Without His support, we cannot have victory.
In Psalm chapter 7, verse 13, it says, He has prepared His deadly arrows, His deadly weapons. He has made ready His flaming arrows. It's from Psalm chapter 7, verse 13. But in Psalm chapter 18, verse 35, it says, "You give me your shield of victory. Your right hand sustains me." God is always with us, sustaining us and shielding us, always. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, it reminds us what to do and how to keep the faith. It says, fixing your eyes on Jesus, having faith in him. For Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith. He started everything. He is the perfecter of our faith. He's the perfecter of faith. Jesus is the perfect one, that perfect example that we look to. We need to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, depending on him, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus achieved the victory. Rely on Jesus Christ. This talks about the idea of fixing. This means don't let your eyes be distracted. Keep your gaze on Jesus. Fix your eyes on him. So for example, horses, they have like an eye covering. So they can't look around, get distracted, there's some grass over there. Instead, they just continue to plow the field because they can only see that little path right in front of them. Donkeys also, perhaps those of you has anyone ridden a donkey before? Raise your hand. Anyone ridden a donkey? It's very challenging to ride them. They often buck quite a bit when a person tries to ride them, tries to take off the wheel. It's not smooth at all. It's a bouncy ride. Donkeys are often very stubborn. It's very hard to get them to move forward. One farmer was trying to get his donkey to manipulate it to go forward. So he got a wooden stick and he didn't beat that donkey with it. Instead, he tied a string to the stick and he tied a carrot to the string. And he got the donkey to move by bribing him with the carrot. So the donkey took a step forward, trying to get that carrot, trying to eat that carrot. The donkey kept its eye on the carrot, and he was able to get it to move without beating it or anything. And so donkeys are stubborn, and we are similar to donkeys. It's very hard for us to do what God's called us to do. But in the New Testament, Jesus comes on, and he rides on a donkey. It's very surprising. He rides on a donkey perfectly into Jerusalem, and there's this celebration. Everyone is worshiping him. It should have been a wild animal, but it was humble. And Jesus Christ, the creator of all, sat on its knee, sat on its back. And so we, like the donkey, need to keep our eyes fixed on the carrot, that is Jesus Christ. And we keep following Jesus Christ. This idea of fixing your eyes on Jesus. We fix our eyes on Jesus. We follow him. Jesus is our carrot, as it were. He is our reward. He's our leader. We follow him. He is the author and perfecter of our faith. Let us fix our eyes on him and follow his example. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to conclude my message this morning. Once again, this message has been on the shield of faith. The fiery darts of the enemy come against us, and we hold up the shield of faith to defend ourselves. And so someone says, how do we get faith? And this verse answers that question in Romans chapter 10. So faith comes through hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. The word of Christ. That is how faith comes to us. the Word of God, as we learn the Word of God, our faith, so does faith come. And in 1 John, chapter 5, verse 4, it says, "For everyone born of God overcomes the world." This is the victory that overcomes the world, even our faith.
Yeah, she has, because she...
From 1 John chapter 5, verse 4.
She just said no.
Faith overcomes the world. That's a promise to us. As we stand with the shield of faith, we will defeat our enemy. We will stand strong against the devil. God will give us this help. In Matthew chapter 28, verse 20, Jesus said, "Lo, I heard you always." And he promised to never leave or forsake us in another place. He is with us always. Like the song talked about, it's before, behind, and we need to rely on him. And I have one final story. Peter. He had been with Jesus Christ for 3 years. He was in Jesus' inner circle. And Peter saw the miracles that Jesus done, the preaching, the teaching, the healings. He'd seen everything, how Jesus had forgiven sins. He'd seen it all. So one day, Jesus asked Peter about his faith. Jesus was walking on the water to his disciples during a storm. Peter saw this. And he said, "Jesus, can I come out to you?" And Jesus said, "Yes, come to me." But it was important that Peter keep his eyes fixed on Jesus. Not that he would look around at the waves or at the sea, because there was a great storm around him. And the minute Peter took his eyes off Jesus, he sunk beneath the water. But Jesus reached down and pulled him up. And Jesus said, "Oh, you of little faith." He called him little faith. That meant
You can do that.
he needed to have,
I'll just make one.
Jesus used this, you of little faith. So now I want to ask a question to everyone here today. Are you like Peter? Are you one of little faith? So analyze your hearts this morning. Do you have full 100% confidence in God that he is going to give you the victory, that he is going to be with you, that your faith will have the victory, that you will overcome the world? Let's stand.